I started recording. So,
There we go.
hi
Cool.
everyone. Matthew, do you want to go first and tell us about like your experience with this adventure, the difference between term paper and the final published article, and any advice for teams that want to decide whether to embark on something similar or not?
Yeah. Wow. So in some ways, I guess there was two chunks to this: the term project, and then as we were talking about the getting it published. I would say like it felt like there was a couple of things at the start that were really big, like finding a team you could work with, and then um, having the topic and getting from the topic to having data we thought was interesting and useful. Um, felt um, I was shocked, I guess, that the data we needed to do the project existed. Or once I talked to some friends um, in the kind of civil department about what data is available of this type, and they had like kind of a notion that GDOT kept kind of the core data set we ended up using. And then I just ended up emailing a couple of people and worked my way to a guy at GDOT who was willing to burn the data onto a CD and leave it with security so some security guard could give us it. Um,
So,
so I
so
guess,
data availability and then the access to the data was a extremely important part of this work. But then after that, it's not just the data.
yeah. So after that, um, man, it's such a long. Um, I guess our first thing was kind of we came up with something we wanted to test on the data. So we wanted to see what was the effect of before and after the renovations. Um, was safety improving? And I came up into it with a strong expectation that we were going to show that these renovations worked very well. Um, not what we ended up finding. But I guess I had some idea of like I wanna get into this and see. I guess I wanted to show that it worked and be able to say like, oh, this is the way out. I guess it became a more interesting result once we found it wasn't what
I
we were
think
expecting.
that's a fantastic observation. I didn't think about that you had that, Matthew. I feel there's something about the intellectual honesty, and then you let the analysis. You do like as good as possible of a job in the data collection, and then the analysis, and then you let the results lead the way.
Hmm.
And any advice for teams who may want to decide whether to embark on this or not?
Um, yeah, a couple. On the turning it into a journal paper, I was actually, I have to say, like, I felt like because it wasn't tied to a class deadline, it was a ton of work, but it felt like it was more manageable than I was expecting, or than I was worried it would be. And I felt like I got a lot out of improving my writing ability. That was the rewriting experience was really valuable. I mean, I've never stuck with a paper for this long. Um, I mean, I'm used to, I think a lot of people like write papers for high school, maybe redraft it once or twice, but never going
So that
through.
was on the writing. What about the analysis or the delta analysis and addition from paper to article, from
Yeah.
project to article?
Um,
Do you want
and
me to talk about that?
yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about, I would say even maybe going through revisions was such a big thing. Like when we got the comments back, I feel like the paper changed a lot after the first round of reviewer comments.
Mhm.
And there were a bunch of little moments like that where kind of what is the structure of the story we're telling changed, or like the data shifted, or the data we wanted to present kind of
Yeah.
shifted as we figured out what story we wanted to tell.
Okay. That's great. Thanks, Matthew. And then if I'll go around, and if at the end you have some additional thoughts, you can. Christopher, what did you think on these kind of three general questions?
I'll try to keep it fairly short, but my impression was, if you're familiar with the term paper was kind of a minimum viable product, and they were saying, well, we got the data, we're going to throw it together, and then you procrastinate a little bit in college, so you just kind of get something out there at the end. And it took a little longer than we thought it was going to, and it ended up being a little rough around the edges, but it worked out fairly nice, the term project. But then not to be too cliche, but we kind of took it to the next level and actually putting more rigor into it and taking what we had, expanding upon it substantially. We did significantly more analyses than we had more time to do so. And we made it more well-rounded and treated additional. And again, as you said, we went through several rounds of improving the paper. I would describe the group project as, say, the first round. And then we did it, like I'd say, 4 or 5 additional circles where we went around and we spiraled out and made it better and better. We did more in-depth analyses, where the last 2 or 3 of those were based upon reviewer comments. And we did more rigorous analyses on the data analysis side. And then and I think the last most impactful one was looking specifically at the additional street renovations, as that was added, where we went out on the streets, or Dr. Sally went out on the streets and looked at particularly what was done there, which I think really fleshed out the work more. So each time we went around, it got a little longer, a little more whole. So I'd say spending more time on the project, we took it from a unit that almost worked and was kind of somewhat cohesive to something that was much more well-rounded, well-polished, and well thought out.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Christopher. And by the way, any advice for teams who may want to decide whether to embark on such an adventure or not?
If you're interested in the topic, it's worth it to learn more about it. If you just kind of threw it together at the last minute, you're just doing it because you had to, probably not a good idea. But like Wallace and I, we both are on the streets of Atlanta a lot, and we like biking around, running around, exercising. So we had a personal stake on saying whether the streets were safe and whether the improvements that were being done actually made a difference. So that personal stake and buy-in made us motivated to go the extra mile or so and say, hey, are these projects actually working?
That is fantastic.
So if you're invested in the project, it's fully worthwhile to do so.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Christopher. Mikkel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of jumping off that same kind of theme. It is kind of impressive to see the sheer difference in quality from our first draft we turned in at the end of the first semester there to what we've turned in now and has actually been published. Our first draft was kind of like a flaming pile of hot garbage compared to what we is. It is just insane how much iteration we've gone through this. I mean, I can't even count. There's been dozens of drafts that would be like very good final term projects. And that was just our first project that was actually pretty good. And now, like, looking back on that was, like, so disjointed. I remember us in the Colk, like, just banging it out for, like, 6 hours straight or something like that. Just like, okay, we got to make 6,000 words, and we got to make Dr. Staley happy, and that'll be it. That's it. We're never going to touch this again. And here we are, like, a year later or something like that. We know this thing inside and out, and it's just incredible how much it's grown.
I should clarify to those who will be listening to this video in the future that just today we got the paper finally in final corrected form. So we're kind of
it's March 2021. We submitted it, or we had our final submission December 2019 for the class specifically, and just submitting the paper to the actual publishers. It was kind of shocking how long it takes. That takes months. I think our first go around was 6-8 months ago or something like that, maybe something like that. And yeah, it's a lot of downtime. And then of course, after we got our first round of reviewer comments, it was wow, okay, we thought we had a really good paper, and they're here's these glaring issues that we completely forgot about. And you're absolutely right. These are really good points. And once you have those outsider perspectives, then you can really iterate, and then you have an actual good quality refined final piece of thing. And that's just, it's crazy. Yeah, I like Matt said, I've never put this much time into a paper. I don't think I put more than a week's worth of effort into a paper. And we've put well over a year, and we've had these weekly meetings, and we've all had so many iterations on it and so much internal discussion. I never thought I'd put this much stake into do we do an Oxford comma here? Do we put quotations? Do we italicize this instead? And it's like nobody actually cares, but it's like that's the amount of depth you actually go into, and it's just crazy. So it's
By the
super
way,
informative, and like
I
as
should
an
point
engineer,
out
you'd never think you'd get into that kind of depth. So
If I
pretty
can
great.
butt in here really quick, I want to
Yeah.
point out it's not that much of a time commitment. It was only like maybe
No.
2-3 hours, maybe surged to 10 hours on a bad week, but normally it was an hour or two a week.
But it's like just
So
like
it's
the,
not
the
that
depth
much
of
of a time
consideration
commitment.
of
It's
like
spread
how
over
far
a
I
much
went
longer
to.
period of time.
Yeah, it's super in depth. It's just crazy to see how far it's come.
that is incredibly interesting and awesome. Like you guys have done like such a nice like self-reflection on this effort.
Oh,
Joshua, what do you think? And
I mean, just
for,
sorry. So just thinking back to when we first were picking out topics, this was right after the summer when bird scooters were all the rage.
yeah.
And that was really our focus, is how do e-scooters impact city transportation? How do they impact other pedestrians? What impact do they have on bike lanes and, other vehicles? And that was really our focus going into it, and seeing how much that paper changed from that just to the project we turned in at the end of that semester, let alone to what it looks like now, is absolutely incredible. And there was another point partway through the writing of the paper when we were looking for specific data that we couldn't find, and we had to at some point say, okay, we can't find pedestrian data, but what if we use vehicles as a proxy? Sure, this doesn't get us exactly what we want, but it gets us in the right direction, and it also provides a stronger point that the data we're looking for should be collected, and that an effort really does need to be made to prove our point.
And it was also super interesting, like turning that lack of data into like an actual point where like
Right.
we don't have this data. Wait, do they have that data? Why don't they have that data? And it kind of like turns into like this extra angle and an extra point and purpose towards our
that's
paper
right. And
notes.
by the way, I feel like the idea of the way we conducted the statistical analysis with having these control streets, the before and after with the control street, was in part dealing with the limitation of the absence of lit plus data. But yeah, I mean, I forgot, like, Christopher, I think you mentioned the minimum viable product. So to use that terminology of startups, you have the MVP, but then what you do with the startup is you pivot. As you realize what your market or market conditions are, you keep pivoting. And I mean, that's what you're describing. Is like you have an idea, you are committed to it, you have a personal relationship with it, and then you start investigating. There's the idea of data availability or not availability. There's how do you tune or adjust your analyses to cope with these limitations. Then you keep pivoting and pivoting until you get this really wonderful, very nicely polished and just meaningful contribution. Awesome. Anything else you guys want to add?
And just to go off that last point, the only piece of advice I would give is don't be afraid to pivot. At some point, you're not going to find what you're looking for, and you need to adjust.
Not
So
sacrificing your intellectual ability, you're adapting
Exactly.
to it and like actually figuring how you can fit all the pieces together. Like that's totally fine to
exactly.
tweak the formula.
Maybe.
So I guess to piggyback on that, you have the e-scooters, and then we said, so we only found like 3 or 4, maybe 5 data points that had actually been hit on an e-scooter. So we said, okay, how can we make this? There are a lot of pedestrians that have been hit. There are a lot of bicyclists that have been hit, and there were like some like mopeds too. And so what the data we have presented them all as we were going and trying to find, well, there were just these other categories that had the e-scooters in it. Well, let's expand the scope from e-scooters, and then it was like other small things on the road. And then we expanded it further from that. Well, let's lump bicycles in there too. So now we have light individual transit. And then we said, well, a lot of this is pedestrians as well as bikes. So let's lump those all together and we get lit plus. So we just made it more and more inclusive so we had enough data to actually do analyses on until we got to the point where we could actually compare it. So again, pivot.
Pivot with a core that is really meaningful, I feel. Overall, I think this is, by the way, I'll show the video after we discuss it in class, so maybe we'll see how the students react to the paper first. But I feel it's a beautiful paper. It is really meaningful. It has something like of a like a deep core. It reflects a very nice value, like commitment to both the intellectual integrity, but also craftsmanship in the kind of data analysis and the discussion that we have. And just like Mikkel said, we argued over commas and over words, and even the reviewers were actually pushing back on specific word or turn of a phrase, which was like just a wonderful level of depth into this. But I was telling the team earlier today over email that our adventure now with the paper is over, but the adventure of the paper by itself now just start. The paper is going to go out and live its own life. And because we were lucky enough to manage to publish in open access, we had the support from the Emory Injury Prevention Center. We can make this publicly available, and we started circulating this widely, including to the Georgia Department of Transportation, the Atlanta folks, the Atlanta, I forgot what it's called, the Transportation Agency or related agency. I think they call it something else now. And, we may never hear about what kind of impact this has, but I feel we can be content with the idea that it will help shape or influence some folks thinking about street renovation and bringing lit plus safety to the forefront of their discussion, and in a meaningful, competent way. Okay. All right, that's great. Anything else?
I guess one last thought. The figures we have in the PDF you're looking at, just like the original text was not the original stuff from our report, the figures are not the original stuff in our report that we submitted as a group project. And they evolved significantly. I think maybe one or two figures survived through all the revisions.
Oh, yeah, no.
But the rest of them were recast, remade along with our analyses. So don't worry about making things looking great on the first try. Just get something together. And if you do
your first draft is going to suck compared to like the 40th or so. It's fine.
Oh, yeah.
There's going to be flaws. It's fine.
Most of the plots are made in a JMP Pro 14, which you have a free student access license to, and it's very popular in ASDL. If anyone wants training on it, I'm sure you can ask Barack or someone else. But
by the way, one lesson learned from
great for data visualization.
What you guys were talking about, I would say maybe for the term project, one lesson for selecting term project, one lesson learned is to front load, if you're going to do something data driven, to front load the search for data and check whether it's available or what level of difficulty before you commit to something.
Yeah, and just feedback on the class. I still think like one of the reasons we got a paper together well is we had the earlier deadline of doing a presentation, and like making our main figures and then talking about it with people really, I felt like kind of helped us refine. I feel like just talking to people about it at that led to a lot of changes to the paper.
It's also open feedback too, because there are people asking questions back at you. It's like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. That's a good point. So
yeah,
you're crowdsourcing your final product, kind of, sort of. So.
Also, Matthew, you're in college, so the sooner you're forced to have a deliverable, the less you can procrastinate on it. So.
Matthew, are you saying the feedback from which presentation?
We had a presentation on poster boards.
Yeah.
The poster. Yes. Yeah.
Course. I guess not presentation, but the poster session. That was.
Yeah. Well, like this. While we're filming this, we're still like locked in with COVID, and we're still waiting on vaccine and what have you. So no poster session until further notice. But basically, in the good old days, BC, before COVID, we would hang out. There'd be like, I would invite people from different areas. We'd have like a nice buffet or like appetizers, and everyone would present their posters. People would go around. Very busy. Wonderful event, and usually very busy. 100, 150 people would be attendance. Yeah. Well, we'll see if we can get back to that situation.
Oh wow, that changed even more than I thought.
All right. Well, this is it, guys.
Here we are.
I will give you a virtual hug. This was a wonderful adventure. Thank you for all the effort you put into this. Just a wonderful, wonderful product. I'm so proud to be part of this.
And yeah, I mean, if Dr. Saley emails you, is like, hey, your paper was pretty good, you want to iterate on this, just say yes. He's a wonderful resource. He's been a good coach. Just don't pass up that opportunity because it's not as much work as you'd think it would be. It's just a steady, just flow. It's just nice.
By the way, I didn't pay him or tell him or.
No, I graduated like a year ago. I have no reason to say this.
No cash or credit card were involved in this transaction.
That check better not bounce, I swear to God.
I mean, you did have candy in your office, though.
That's true.
You know, it's been a year. I haven't had a single person in my office.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I don't know how to
Crazy.
teach this way. But anyway, I'm hoping in the fall I'll be able to teach in person. But
hopefully, yeah.
All right, wonderful seeing you guys. Take care. Stay in touch. Have a nice evening.
We'll do.
Have a nice
Take
evening.
care.
Bye.
Right.